I really do think the S2H is now it's going to be in front of everyone's eyes because I feel like it was the first full frame, so no one was like, "Oh, it's wait, what are they doing?" So they weren't really sure. And then the A7S3 came out, and then everyone just kind of jump shipped. But what's another cool thing about Lumix is they're not in the game to get you to buy a camera every year. They're in a game to be loyal to us, and we be loyal to you. That when you buy our camera, we're gonna work with you for the next 5 years before you need to probably move on to a new camera. But what kept me with like Lumix is because what they do with their cameras is they're always a step ahead of everyone. But that's what Lumix does. They put a standard and everyone tries to beat it.
In this episode, I got to sit down and have a chat with Ollie, who's an incredible filmmaker based out of Florida. Now, in this conversation, we talked all about the S1H versus the S5 IIX, and how the S1H was a little bit of a sleeper camera when it first got announced. Now, we dived all into this conversation talking about the S1H versus the S5 IIX and a lot of other topics on why you might not want to miss out on the next high-end cinema full-frame camera from Lumix, the S1H Mark II, whenever that comes out. Anyways, let's dive right into the episode.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate you for that intro. That's super nice of you. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting me. I'm stoked to be here. I'm stoked to talk about the S1H. It's gonna be fun.
Yep. Yeah, so in this conversation today, just to give my audience a little bit of context, we will be diving into kind of the S1H versus the S5 IIX, kind of the future of Lumix cameras on the higher end. But just to give you guys a context of who Ollie really is. Ollie is an incredible filmmaker, also just a rad human being. But I can speak super highly. Ollie, kind of give some context of who you are to my audience. You haven't fully started YouTube yet, but you're planning to soon. I encouraged you. Anthony encouraged you. It's happening soon. Hopefully your first episode comes out by the time this is over.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Like we said, I met Matthew at NAB literally like 3 weeks ago now. I don't know what it is, but
Yep.
instantly was kind of had a really cool connection there as friends, and so kind of had a lot of similarity of lifestyles and what we like, how we run our life, I guess you could say. So it's pretty cool. And of course, we totally bonded over Lumix and just being a little bit of fanboys over those guys. So pretty cool. Yeah, as far as YouTube, I got super inspired with just seeing how Matthew and other people were running their YouTube and like what that was doing for them. And it's something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to teach. I've always wanted to kind of also, I guess one of my biggest things is progression. Progression is such an important thing of life because when it's kind of like, say when you're a kid, you mark your height on the kitchen pantry, and then years go by, you mark your next height, and you see, man, I've grown so much. And so YouTube's kind of a cool way like that because you get to post a video, and then years go on, and you see your next post, and you're like, man, I have grown substantially within these couple of years. I've learned so much. What I thought was amazing was all right, but look where I'm at now. And I think it's just super important for human beings to see where they've come. That way they know they're moving forward. And so yeah, I think that's super important. So I'm stoked to do YouTube finally, kind of put it down. I actually have 3 videos in the queue, so they're already done, ready to go. Just kind of working on, I guess, my thumbnails. I'm just kidding. But just like working on like getting those out, and it's the perfect timing for me. So it's there. I'm putting the work in. I'm stoked about it. As far as who I am, I kind of skipped all that. But as far as who I am, I'm a freelance filmmaker down here in the Central Florida area, so Orlando. And I have been in the film industry probably for about 6 years. Right out of college, I went to school for film, which is probably pretty controversial. And I have a whole thought on that on a different video. But yeah, so right out of school, I was working for a film company. And we were doing all kinds of cool commercial projects. We did stuff for Disney out in England. We were traveling all around. We did Carrabba's, Hewlett-Packard commercials. Just a lot of cool things that I was able to do right out of school that I learned a ton that I was able to take onto my freelance world. And so I've been freelance for about a year and a half, about a year and a half full time. And it's been amazing. The Lord's been He's been providing for me day in, day out, and I can't complain about that. And it's just been good. I primarily work in the corporate side of stuff. I'm trying to move more corporate commercial, a little bit more commercial, but I'm trying to move more into a DP role and colorist role. So I'm really trying to more DP. I love coloring. It's more of a hobby thing, but DPing for commercial is kind of my goal, my end goal right now. Slowly getting there. It's going to take a while, but it's fun. And again, looking at the progression of where I've come and to where I'm going. So I'm excited.
Yeah, a couple of things that I want to unpack of like kind of your story that you were telling. First off, what if would a goal for yourself be YouTube full time if that ended up happening? Say the channel took off, would you still be like DP's end goal, or now it's like, all right, now I'm just running my own like media production company, which is, YouTube?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I mean, if it took off and it's providing payment for the bills, that'd be amazing. My main thing is I love teaching. I love teaching. So if YouTube was that avenue of how I could teach and build out courses through that, then yeah, 100%. I would love that. Honestly, DPing and doing the film work is like I love that. But that could be stressful sometimes, and it's like you got to find that work, and sometimes it's not always
Right.
consistent. YouTube's kind of more consistent if you think about it. You can do it at home. You can do it anytime you want if it's doing well for you. I guess you get as much as you put into it. So I mean, yeah, if it took off, I would absolutely be stoked about that. Let's go. I would love
Right.
that. but
Right. I
but there's a
I feel
passion
like it's
behind it.
a right. And I feel like it's a misconception that YouTubers who are like in the film world only do YouTube, but it's actually not really that. It's kind
Sure.
of that balance of like you can now it's more freedoms to take on commercials instead of being
Mm,
less of like, okay, I have to take every single commercial because this is my main source of income. It's a
right.
little bit of that split divide
Totally.
of, between income and just also like your passion. So it's kind of cool. Like YouTube provides that multiple streams of revenue. And that's like something I've seen in myself. Like with a channel only with only around 4,000 subscribers, it's like providing a substantial source of income because I have multiple revenue streams from it. But also kind of you have a sick story that I would love to share. Now, I don't publicly say this on my YouTube channel too much, but I'm also not hiding it either. I am Christian. It's like you could see all my tattoos and stuff for my audience, which you probably already seen or seen that. Ollie has a super sick story if you want to share. I'd love to hear kind
Yeah.
of your story behind, kind of the story about AMS films if you're willing and comfortable to share
Yeah.
that. It's such a sick story that I think is like really cool for my listeners to hear and just for other people to hear as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you love it because it's a fun story to tell. So yeah, my company is called Amos Films, and I kind of took that because it has to do with my mom's testimony. And so my mom, in her early 20s, her and my dad were married. They were trying to have kids, and the doctors, I think they tried for 4 or 5 years, and the doctors kept saying, no, your body will never be able to conceive children, unfortunately. And she kept trying, didn't believe it, and then she went to specialists after specialists, money after money, trying to, get these testings done. And even the specialist said, you'll never be able to. It's just kind of the outcome. Your next lookout would be to do, adopting some child. So someone during that time had come up to her and was telling my mom had shared her story and her heart was broken, and someone had come up to her and said, "Hey, there's a God that can do miracles. Do you know him?" And just kind of shared the who Jesus is, who the Lord is, and what He can do for you. And she's like, "Okay." Wasn't a believer at the time. It was like, let me. I mean, I'm kind of desperate this time. I want to have children. This is a God who can do miracles. Let me look into that. So she did, and the person that was talking to her gave her a verse called Amos, or scripture was called Amos 5:6, and in that verse it says, "Seek the Lord and you shall live." And so my mom just kind of kept that in the back of her mind and was praying with that. And yeah, it was not too long after. I think it was a year later after just giving her life to the Lord and pursuing Him, and a miracle came out, and it was my brother, it was Augustine. Then she had another miracle, Maya, me as Oliver, and then my little sister Sophia. And it was years later, after all that, that we figured out that without even trying, that Amos represented my family in that order. So my brother August, Maya, Oliver, Sophia, and we weren't planning for that. My mom wasn't planning for that. She just named him because she liked those names. And but yeah, it was an incredible story because not only that, I think literally probably this year, it was probably a few months ago. I was like, man, do I like the name Amos Films? Like, should I go by Oliver and just like Oliver Ernest or whatever my film company is? People should understand me as that, not Amos. And then I was like, what? My wife's like, well, what does Amos even mean? Because we never actually figured out the name Amos, what it meant. And we find out that the name Amos means born by God, which just blows my mind because these kids were not supposed to be born by anyone but God, and they were. And then now I think about Amos Films as films born by God. And again, I don't hide it either. I'm not throwing it down your throat that hey, I'm a Christian and you should live this way. I hope I live by example, and that would be enough. But I'm always open to conversation But now I'm like, I can't get rid of Amos Films. This is such a great testimony of my mom's story and then what the Lord can do with miracles. And so I'm very proud to be under my freelance work under Amos Films. So yeah.
Dude, so rad. Thanks for sharing that. Like, it's such a, there's so many cool testimonies and so many cool stories about like the names behind people's companies, and it's a super powerful testimony. So I appreciate you sharing that. Um, well, unawkwardly and awkwardly, transitioning on as well. First off, before we even transition, I actually love this setup you got going
Oh,
on. I'm
thanks.
realizing it's fake light in the back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this is a sick setup right now.
Dude, thanks.
So you've been shooting on Lumix for quite some time. What's your journey of that between, before we dive really deep into the S1H versus the S5 and get really in the nitty gritty about that? What's your journey for shooting on Lumix cameras? Why have you started shooting on Lumix cameras, and why do you continue to shoot on Lumix cameras? I know currently right now you're on the S1H and the S5, looking to upgrade to maybe an S1H Mark II, which we'll dive into at the end of this conversation. But give us that journey of what was that journey for you to Lumix, and why do you continue to shoot on them?
So I was in college. I think we all grew up on having a camera in the household that we kind of messed around with. It could be an iPhone at this time, but back then it was a camcorder or VHS like recorder, tape recorder. So I really got into film and with my parents' stuff. And then when I got to college, I didn't really have a film camera. I didn't have any camera to shoot, but I was going to school for film, so I felt like super like, ooh, this is weird. I don't have anything to shoot, and I want to shoot every day. I want to practice. And so as we all probably start off, we all started in weddings, trying to get that it's source of income, it's consistent, it started out free, whatnot. And so during that time in college, back in 2013, I had gotten a wedding gig, but I had no camera, and so I told the couple, I was like, hey, I would love to shoot your wedding, and I would do it for free ish, but all you have to do is pay for the gear to get it, and I can keep the gear. That's my payment, basically. You pay for the gear, I take that, and I'll shoot your wedding. And I was looking at cameras, and one that was in my price range that looked really good at the time was a GH4. And so, like, it feels like a throwback now. But that camera was amazing for what it was. That Micro Four Thirds sensor looked so good. And that camera had such great reviews. I watched so many videos on that back in the day. Yeah, so they gave me the GH4. I looked into that camera, watched a ton of reviews on that. I fell in love with it. And so I bought like a bundle on Amazon, and it had like all these crappy SD cards that I thought were that was it. I made it. I thought it came with like a little glide gear like holder that was supposed to stabilize my gear or my footage, and of course it did not. It was terrible. But the camera was amazing, and it looked amazing, and it was my first camera to get into Lumix, and I just felt like that camera, for such a small sensor, it just looked good. I did so much work on that in college that I was like, I even shot like a short film on it, and I just felt, and we played it in the theater, and it looked amazing. Like I wouldn't have known. I mean, probably now, but like back then, it was a great camera for the price. I think it was like maybe $1,400 for a GH4 or something like that with the bundle. And I was like, man, this camera's amazing. And so I stuck with that camera for a long time. And then I ended up going to that production company. So I didn't need to buy another camera because I was kind of using whatever they needed. But I always had that camera with me. Then finally they announced this full frame, that they're going full frame. And I was like, oh my gosh, I already love Lumix. I already know everything about my camera. I'm sure this is going to be amazing. And they're saying it's Netflix approved. They're saying all kinds of cool things. And it's just the specs of the loan of this S1H. I was like, why? Of course I am. It was beating out every spec in 2019 for this body type. And I was like, man, it's August. I just got married, and we're just like I'm looking for a new camera, and it's out, and I've been watching all the reviews, and it's just blowing my mind. I mean, it's a 6K frame, full frame sensor. You can shoot open gate, which is like stuff that you only see in the higher end of cameras. They're saying that you're getting the VariCam color science in here, and like that's amazing. If you don't know VariCam, it was shot on, like they shot Ozark with that, so it's a very capable film camera, cinema camera. And so like they're compacting it into this little box of a camera, and I was like, man. And then the features of like the record button in the front, the one on top, you have 180 frames per second if you want to shoot slow-mo. And then of course it was doing 4K 60. It was cropped, but no one was doing it. No one was doing it. 4K 24 was all you had. And so this is doing 4K 60 at Super 35, and it was like, man, amazing. Like it was just like feature packed camera that it just was blowing my mind. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I was like, yeah, of course I'm going with this camera. But what kept me with like Lumix is because what they do with their cameras is they're always a step ahead of everyone. In my opinion, they're doing stuff that's revolutionary. Even with the S5X2, like and the proxy and all the new firmware, like no one's doing that. That's insane. And that's gonna, I honestly, I think companies are going to try, they have to compete with that because, but that's what Lumix does. They put a standard and everyone tries to beat it. But what's another cool thing about Lumix is they're not in the game to get you to buy a camera every year. They're in a game to be loyal to us and we be loyal to you, that when you buy our camera, we're going to work with you for the next 5 years before you need to probably move on to a new camera. And that's what I love about them. They're for us, and I love that. And they make things that are just featured packed that you would expect in a higher level.
I think that's actually a cool way to phrase it, because as you were even speaking, that's how I thought about it. Was Lumix is always ahead of the time. Every time they release a camera, it's like, yes, this is it. Like, obviously the S1H, the GH5 have been cameras that have just been known by that.
Right.
But then the way I was thinking about it was like, yeah, but then the issue is, you know, all these camera companies then catch up, and then like Lumix is behind again. But
right.
The next camera Lumix drops is always super far ahead. So it's always like one of those things where it's like, it's like behind, but then they get really ahead, but then they're behind.
Right.
But I think it's a good way you put it is like, actually it's more intentional, so it's not as much of a cash grab like Sony and Canon and Fuji and all these other camera companies are doing. Like, here's the new camera every year, here's the new camera every year. And right now, obviously Lumix is hitting out more cameras right now, just because, you know, it's been 5-6 years since the original S1 series camera. So, you know, the updated cameras are all finally starting to get rolled out. So it is a cool way, because it's like when you buy their camera, it's ahead of its time. And then when it starts feeling like it's behind because other cameras are already caught up, that's when they're about to probably announce another camera. And then it's going to be even better and better within that camera. And that's a kind of a cool perspective. It's like Lumix is like a camera you can grow into with their cameras. It's not so much a camera that like, it's pretty much like all you're gonna get. You know, like the fact that the S5 II and 2X has, well, technically not S5 II, but the fact that S5 2X has Apple ProRes internally in their camera is like kind of insane.
Yeah.
External RAW, B-RAW, and being able to shoot in all of these Kodaks is like something that a lot of other companies are not getting into. Right. And now I guess kind of diving more into talking about the S1H versus the S5 2X. You kind of started diving into specs. Before we even get into it, I think it's worth mentioning the price difference is pretty drastic still, which is kind of shocking. I'm shocked that,
me too.
I guess on the used market, you can get an S1H for pretty decent, probably maybe around $2,000, $1,500 for the body only. But for the new market, you know, it's $3,500 versus $2,000. But the output on both these cameras are very similar. What are some of the video specs that you get with the S1H?
Yeah, the video specs, I mean, we got to keep in mind 2019 because S5X, you know, they're pretty legit camera, and as they were moving forward, and that was a while, you know, before they moved on. So it's not like they gutted me with like another camera. Like, oh, why did I get the S1H? No, I'm in that time of shopping for a new camera, you know? So what they came out with, the S5X, is amazing. And Vlog's amazing. As you know, Vlog is such an incredible color profile. It just looks so dang good. I just did a shootout recently, and my camera, I personally thought won. They just said it didn't, but it looked insane. I was so impressed. I was like, this camera's amazing. But no, like, so you get this camera specifically has the VariCam color science from what they say. You're getting the 14 stops of dynamic range, what they say. Image stabilization, obviously, they've always been leaders in this, and every one of their cameras that has it. Again, we did a shootout recently, and it destroyed Canon, Sony. It destroyed them. I was so stoked, especially for technology. That was 2019. And then you have dual native ISO, which is great. It's competing in the low light, and it does well. What else we have for this camera specifically? You have like there's really great like customization in the front of the camera. I think you have 2 in the front that you can use on the side, and then you have an extra record button up in the front. So if you were to rig this thing entirely out and you can't get to the top one, you have one in the front, which you see in the red cameras and you see in the higher end cameras, which is just really cool that they're doing that on a DSLR style body. Another thing that this one has is the built-in fan, but it has like its own like tilted. It's like a I don't know how to explain. Yeah, it tilts up and then it tilts out.
I've always called it the flippy up, flippy out screen.
It's exactly what it should be called. The flippy out, flippy up, whatever you said. We'll patent that. But no, then it has that, which is really great because it keeps. I've seen where you kind of hit the HDMI cables or something like that, and this just kind of keeps it away. It's got great angles for that if you need it. But then this thing also has time code, which is like, what in the frick? Like, why does this have time code? It's just so freaking capable. Before anyone was doing it at this level was the anamorphic D squeeze all the way from 1.3 to 2x or so. Like there's just so much capability, and then it had image stabilization for your anamorphics. Like, what in the world? On top of that, you have the 422 10-bit. So, and then you have like a nice like a LCD screen on top. It kind of gives you all information. You can see your audio levels if you wanted to. You can see your card readout. Your so if you were to close the camera up, you could literally see all your information that you need right there on top. I'm trying to think what else that it has that differs from the new cameras because again, like what I'm saying, it's an older style. The autofocus, we'll probably get into that. Wasn't really meant into that. So
The S1H basically on paper for the majority of it is basically what they put into the S5 II and 2X, just obviously with, different autofocus. It's not a contrast based versus phase detect, which we'll touch on, but it's also, it technically is still very cam log. However, it's just on a new sensor, so therefore the color science is slightly different. So I'm pretty sure the V-Log on the original S1H is the exact same V-Log that was on the S5 and the GH6, which is definitely gives you a lot more of a warmer tones, a lot softer. Meanwhile, on the S5 II and 2X, because of phase detect autofocus, well, okay, I'm not going to say because of phase detect autofocus because someone's going to roast me in the comments. But theoretically, based off what I've seen, at least on the GH6 versus the G9 Mark II, I've noticed that because it seems like it's a new sensor, it's a new phase detect sensor, it's not using contrast-based autofocus, it's a new V-Log color science, which looks very similar. You can still use the exact same LUTs for the S1H and the S5 II and 2X. If you're interested in getting the classic teal and orange LUT, you can purchase that in the link in the description. But it is still just takes a little bit more tweaking, potentially which one you are using. But I think the biggest advantage for an S1H right now is, like you said, is the layout. On the backside, it's basically almost identical to the S5 II and 2X. On the front side, though, is where those extra advantages really come in. Obviously, like you said, tally lights, having a front record button. Oh, how I cool. Miss. I still own a GH6 right now, but that camera I'll probably sell the moment the GH7 comes out because I just miss having a front record button when I'm shooting primarily now on the S5 IIX. The two front function buttons, there's only one on the S5 II and 2X, which is great for, I don't know what you customize those buttons to, but for myself, I customize it to either boost image stabilization lock and then electronic stabilization lock, so I can have all my stabilization in the same spot.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many great advantages, and basically they took the S1H and then they worked off and built off on that camera to the S5 II and 2X. When the S5 II and 2X, granted, it was 5 years later when it came out, or I guess maybe 4-ish when it came out. What did you feel like when that camera came out from an S1H user perspective? Did you feel like, wow, this is basically the S1H just in a different camera body style and with face detect autofocus and then obviously a couple added features which we could touch on? But what was your perspective on that when that camera got announced?
Yeah. When the 2 came out, I was a little hurt. Mainly because I was like, oh, the price difference. That's what it was. It was like, when I got my camera, I think I paid $4,000 something with some extras on it, right? But for the body alone, it's $4,000, right? And then I see this camera come out, which time had passed, so it was time. It wasn't like they were screwing me over or anything. They had put their time in and they're moving on. But I saw the price and I was like, oh, for all those features, the ProRes, because the X is what I would go for, just to have that function. That's amazing. But like you said before, ProRes, and then you have option of B-roll, and then you also have V-Log. So you have 3 codecs to be able to shoot in. I'm like, what in the world? That's amazing. And so it kind of hurt me a little bit. I thought, I'm like, should I sell my camera for this? And I could maybe get that camera and something else, because it would sell for a pretty good amount. But yeah, so when I first saw it, I was impressed, very impressed. I'm like, again, here they are with the features that no one else is doing at this level for that price. And then I will say recently when we were at NAB and the new features came out, and you're talking about the firmware, I was like, oh, dude. Because the S1H hasn't been updated for a while as far as like the in-body stuff. It's all been like helping with Blackmagic, like connectivity. So I think it's been a while since they updated that. And it makes sense, they're moving forward. But yeah, man, when I saw the firmware with the proxies and everything they're doing, I was just like, dude, they are. I feel like it's time to switch soon. I don't know, but I'll be honest, I haven't, because I still love the S1. It does. I don't need to pay for another camera because it does exactly what I need it to do. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to say, "Oh, I'm all manual focus. The only way to go." No, I see autofocus as a huge benefit and a huge tool. I primarily use manual focus just because that's something I got used to, and I just kind of stuck with it because this camera is not. It's good. It's not reliable all the time, and that's what you need when you do autofocus. So I've used it on a few things, but it's not reliable. So I'm not switching over because it's a new autofocus or anything like that. And I will say, like, I just love this S1H because it also has a low pass filter inside of it, which helps with moire, but it also helps a little bit. I've seen it like just a little. It has a little bit of a style to it because it brings down a little bit of that softening to the sensor. And I've just noticed it in all my work. I'm like, I love the look that's coming out of this camera specifically. Not that you can't get it out of the 5X and all that stuff. But something about this camera has just grown with me where when it's in my hands, I know it. And I know that they're similar to the other body, but there's something that just it formed to me. Like you said, I've grown into this camera, and now it's a part of me. So it's kind of hard to detach. But we'll get into like, is this still worth it as a camera right now?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I was impressed, but I was a little bit hurt in my own money. I'm like, do I get it or do I not?
And I feel like that's the big thing. It's like if you already own the S1H. And you're looking to like technically downgrade or upgrade, however you want to look at it, to the S5 II or 2X, the big difference really is the autofocus at the end of the day. Obviously, there's added features like the electronic stabilization, which is nuts. The autofocus, of course, real-time LUT, proxies, and I feel like because it's a newer camera, it will get higher end firmware updates than the S1H because it's just newer. They're moving forward with phase detect. Phase detect is the new thing. All their cameras from now on out will have phase detect autofocus. That's not a quote I heard from Lumix, but that's just how, if they didn't do that, that would make absolute no sense. And Panasonic Lumix isn't dumb. They know not to just like, all right, we're gonna go back to contrast based autofocus now, because why not? So they know that all cameras going forward will have phase detect autofocus. But if you already own the S1H and you're looking at the S5 2X, the only reason I would think it's worth purchasing is if for some reason you're like, I need this type of setting or feature like proxies or real-time LUT or the electronic stabilization, or if you need autofocus for whatever reason to be super usable and you're like, I'm done with using manual focus or contrast-based autofocus, then sure. However, if you're like, I use a lot of cinema glass, I already pull focus and I'm really efficient at pulling focus, I don't think it really makes sense to purchase the S1 or the S5 2X if you already own the S1H. What are your thoughts on that?
That's exactly where I'm at. I don't think there's no need to move on to a very, very similar camera. If you already put the money into the S1H, there's no need to, unless you're trying to make money and sell it and do all that, maybe. But if you're going for specs of a camera, you're going to get something very, very, very similar. Yeah, the other one has a little bit more, like you said, firmware updates are probably going to take it out of it's going to grow and be an amazing camera. But yeah, I think it's something that if I, as an S1H user, I'm going to be waiting for something else. And like I said, maybe because I love this camera and they know, you've kind of seen it on YouTube. It's coming back. It's slowly coming back. People are referencing like this camera was overshadowed, and it was. And I'm hoping that pushes Lumix to the S1 Mark II, S1H Mark II, and that's a camera I'm willing to wait for because this camera is extremely capable, and whoever owns this camera knows that. And so I don't think it's worth selling if you have an S1H. But if you have an S5, I think it's probably worth jumping to an S5X.
Now, here's a question before we dive into kind of, you just hit on how you would be looking into upgrading to the S1H Mark II or S2H, whatever they name that camera. Before we get into that, whenever they release that camera and you're like, yes, this is it, you purchase it, would you sell your S1H and your S5 and get an S5 2X to pair with the S1H Mark II? Just so at least then it's the exact same color science.
Yeah.
It's both phase detect autofocus, time to move on. Have you thought about that?
I have, like I said, I have the S5. I don't actually use that camera very often. Mainly because I'm not doing two camera angles a lot. I'm doing this because it's 6K and I can jump in and it's really running guns sometimes. So yeah, 100%. I think I would absolutely sell. Oh, first I would sell my S5 for the X, the 2X, whatever it is, and but I don't know if I'd sell my S1H for a 2H. I think I would just buy the Mark II, because I think those two together are going to look amazing. They're going to be great. Now I am curious what the color is going to be. We'll see all that when that comes out, when that does. If it's completely different and it's more like the X right now, then yeah, I think that'd probably be my way to go. Sell both cameras, get the two new updated ones. But if it's not closer, it's more closer to the S1H and what that was all like, I think I just use the S1H and then the S2H. Honestly, I'm having a hard time trying to sell this camera because I just think I love it. It's one. I still have my GH4. Like, I'm not really the kind of guy that just sells my camera. I just buy a new one if I can, if it fits in the budget.
Yeah.
Honestly,
For the S1H Mark II, I'm trying to ask as many creators that come on this podcast, what do you want for that camera? Because Lumix does listen. They do listen to this podcast. So it is worth mentioning, like, this is what we want to see. This is what a bunch of creators have said simultaneously. So for you, Ollie, what is that? What does that camera look like? What does the shape design? What are the specs? Let's get in the nitty gritty.
yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure this is a very popular one. Internal NDs. That is like,
Facts.
yeah, that's very popular. I think it's because this camera competes with a C70. That's what I just shot against, and it competed completely. I would say it's on par or in some areas better. But if it had an internal ND, I think so many people will be switching over to this incredible camera because it takes it to that next level, and I think that's what it deserves. I think an S2H deserves that. And I know it's tough because I think there's a sacrifice there. It's that IBIS, really great IBIS, or internal NDs. Am I correct there? Right, it's one of the others.
You are correct, but I do know that Lumix would not be willing to sacrifice IBIS
Right.
without their variable. So technically, it would be an electronic variable ND that I think they would want to put into the camera if it's possible. And obviously, it is possible with the Sony Branos, but that's a $25,000 camera.
Right.
So it is possible. So
Right.
I think it's in part where where I think we said in the original conversation is like Lumix is like always so far ahead, and when they release
Right.
a camera, everyone's like, holy shoot.
Yeah.
And I think because of the S5 II and the 2X, and then also a little bit of the G9 Mark II, people won't sleep on this camera, like the S1H Mark II, like they
Right.
did the original S1H. And if Lumix is able to figure out how can we have a very electronic variable ND with, in part, the best image body image stabilization on the market, that thing will sell like hotcakes to
Yeah.
all filmmakers.
Right.
Anyways, continue on. What else do you want? What's that body shape style?
Yeah. Before I get into the bicep, I think that's a great thing you said though. Is like because now they have made such a movement with this new S5X2 and the S5 II. I really do think the S2H is now it's going to be in front of everyone's eyes because I feel like it was the first full frame, so no one was like, "Oh, it's wait, what are they doing?" So they weren't really sure. And then the A7S3 came out, and then everyone just kind of jumped shipped. And so now that we have a whole community behind Lumix, they're waiting. It's gonna be exciting, and I think they're gonna be stoked, and they're gonna see some really good results from that. Body style, I would like to move away from the mirrorless body style, and that's where we're at now. And it's a hefty camera. I would. Personally, I like the box form factor. I like that you can rig things out. Not the BS1H that they have, 'cause that's a little too tiny in my opinion. It looks like Yeah, I feel like it's like a softball. Just throw that thing. But I would like maybe I would say like a size of a Komodo would be perfect, and build it out in its
Right.
own way in the own Lumix fashion. That would be ideal for me. With electronic ibis or electronic indies would be cool. I don't know the difference of how that would look. I don't know if that's. I don't really know. I think it would still be quality. I don't really know electronic as much. I haven't seen much of that. But if that's what they do, and I know Lumix is going to do something good, they're not going to do anything crappy. They're not. They're going to put their time into it. So I trust that. So yeah, if they can do both of that, it's going to be a game changer. Box style with all its like mounting ports and stuff like that. I would love to move away from HDMI and do SDI. I like to have both if we can. As far as the body, keep the red record button in the front, the big beautiful red record button. I think they will. They will not go away from that. There's no way.
Yeah.
And then just keep all the features that it has because it's already has all the great features. Go 4K, full frame 60. That'd be great. I don't really shoot a ton of slow motion, but 120 4K would be cool to have, just to have. But if it doesn't keep me away from it, honestly. Honestly, I don't. I guess they'll do phase detect. I'm cool with that. I would love to have that in there. Even if it didn't, I would still buy it because I'm just so used to manual, and it doesn't hold me back on a lot of these things. But I think it wouldn't be smart.
Definitely
if it
gonna
didn't.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would not be
definitely have
smart.
face detect.
Yeah. But honestly, those are the main things. It's just like let's keep. I don't care about 8K. 6K is all we need. I'm cool with that. Keep the open gate with that. And then 4K full frame, box style, internal NDs, keep the IBIS, and then some more ports in the back like SDI and HDMI, and then some really cool rigging ports that we can have. That's
Right.
all I want.
I don't know. What are your thoughts? What price would you want?
Man, well, let me think. What was the S5? Was that 2000? And then the S5 twos came out, and that was like 2500. What is that price? Do you remember?
S5 twos when they came out, like in the S5 2X, was 2,000 and 2,200, and when the S5 originally came out, it was 2,000. So it literally just came and
Yeah.
replaced the price.
Right. That's pretty insane. So, and because they feature pack things out with pretty good amount of pricing, bracket. I wouldn't be surprised if we're hitting 4,000 and obviously around 4,000, 4,500 or so. 5,000 probably makes sense for all these features that are getting into this. So it's like, I get it. But being Lumix, I could see it in the 4,000 range to 5,000 range. If it's 3,500, that competes with the Pixis and would destroy the Pixis. Is the Pixis $3,000 or something like that?
Pixis is $3,000 right now. However, with all that said, the Pixis only has the exact same video settings as the full frame Blackmagic camera, which is very close to the almost the exact same settings as the S5 2X.
Okay.
So the Pixis is actually competing more with the S5 2X than, the FX3 and those cameras.
Yeah, I think this camera would be competing with the FX3. That's kind of like it's going to be beating those guys out in that range because FX3 is $6,000 or so for the body or so, and so I think I think it's gonna be under 5 is my thought. I would like it under 5 if we can, but I know I'm asking a lot for how many features they're probably gonna pack this out with. But yeah, I'm trying to help other people too. They're hearing this, they're like, oh, they'll pay this much. Like, yeah, I guess, but 4,000 if it's in that range, I'll be like, it's gonna be. I think people would take it. If it's 3,500, it would be selling like crazy. It would, no matter what, people are just gonna grab it. That's gonna be in everyone's camera, checkout store. So that would be really, really competitive. Realistically, I think it's gonna hit probably around where the original one was, and maybe just a little bit more, like they did with the S5X.
So going forward, Ollie's coming out with his own YouTube channel. What is that going to be talking about? What are you planning to do with that? What are your future goals with that? Let's just dive into this as we're starting to land the plane here. Just to start plugging your own channel, let people know who you are. Yeah. I already told you at NAB this is like I think you'd be amazing in the Lumix Creators Backstage group. So
thanks, man.
Plug your channel. Let's see what's the future for Ollie.
Cool. All social media will be under the Amos Films. That goes for Instagram and YouTube. I think I talked about early on progression. So I talk about it. I'm not the greatest at posting things. It's something I've really worked harder and harder. And I know I primarily deal with that imposter syndrome, right? I've had that before, and I think it's something really relatable, and I think should be talked about because it feels like you're alone sometimes. and a lot of you have amazing work, so please do post it. That goes for me too. So I'm working on that. This year is a way to grow, and so my channel for YouTube is really to plan to kind of show you guys what I've learned in the film production world and what I'm learning as a freelancer, and lighting techniques. The kind of the what I really have passion about is DPing. So like learning how to light things, how to work with a director, how to work with a client, like those things that I feel like when people want to know, like how do I get clients, how do I do that stuff? Those are the things I want to teach, and what I've learned. I'm not I don't know everything, so bear with me. We'll be learning together, and I hope you continue to always learn. I hope I always continue to learn. But my YouTube is primarily just for those who are wanting to know how to do this freelance world, how to film, how to make things look good, how to have your clients be happy. And that's kind of what my future is for right now for YouTube. I wanted to expand to so many other things. I am building out a few ideas. I already have things all ready to go. So if you want to jump over there and get ready to watch how that drops as it goes, please do. I'd love to have you come on that journey of YouTube and see how it works out for me. I hope to see you guys there.
But awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. And yeah, everyone, check him out. The link's in the description. Everything will be there, all of his tags. So definitely check out Ollie and tell him that Matthew sent you.
Yeah.
Sweet.
There we go. Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate you having me on this this podcast. I have a little one here who wants to say hello. Not a kid.
Oh.
Look at my little lion cub. Look at this little girl.
Oh, your little kitty cat.
Oh, say bye, Opie. Her name's Opal, just like the diffusion.
Just like Thank you so much for Ollie joining me on this episode. Leave in the comments below on what you would want to see in the next S1H Mark II camera whenever that comes out. Anyways, if you want to see another episode where I talk to another Lumix creator, check out that video right here. Then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Till the next one, guys, peace.